Will the propaganda for this voice never stop? Latest example, an investigation by the Australian newspaper found that school children around the country are now being indoctrinated to support Labor's plan for the voice, that Aboriginal-only kind of parliament. Victoria's, of course, worst, an education department spokesman said, students have conversations about the voice at school because it's important for understanding Victoria's own journey to a treaty. They want students to also back a treaty with Aborigines, just like it was a separate nation. It's government propaganda.
I have no doubt that both sides will be discussed, but certainly the government, it is making it clear that we are supportive of a voice to Parliament.
New South Wales is not pushing it as hard as Victoria, but still the Shearwater Mullumbimby Steiner School warning, says students there can now recite the Uluru Statement by heart. And St Andrew's Cathedral School shows students videos from ABC journalist Stan Grant, a real race warrior there. Joining me is Sarah Game, a One Nation member of the South Australian Parliament, and Clare Batch, Queensland head of the Hilma Network, recruiting women for the Liberal Party. Sarah, you in fact are the only member of the South Australian Parliament who's against the state voice to Parliament that the Labor government there is setting up. That'll even have the right to address Parliament sitting on Cabinet Ministers. And with children now being recruited in schools, look, you must feel overwhelmed by the push for the voice.
Well, thanks, Andrew, so much for having me. And I do want to make clear to everyone listening just how completely out of control and how much the proposed legislation for the voice here has really escalated. I mean, what the government is proposing is that we have 40 elected members. We're going to be having a local First Nations voice, a state First Nations voice. But in addition to that, the most advanced bill, which was released late yesterday, essentially gives this state First Nations voice the ability to create an infinite number of committees and essentially handpick people to go on those committees with guaranteed resourcing. It's like a blank cheque from the South Australian taxpayer.
That's incredible. Sarah, and that, let's remind viewers, that is on top of the 35 regional voices that the federal government is setting up and the central voice. We'll have a voice for almost every Aboriginal person in the country that cares to be on one. But that said, I'm just wondering, Clare, the teaching of in schools at kids, I mean, this surely is indoctrination.
Well, look, I think, Andrew, that you might be engaging in a little bit of Gillard-esque hyperbole there. I wouldn't go so far to say that it's indoctrination, but I would say this. Certainly, politics does not belong in schools. Australians have the rest of their adult lives to have politicians ramming their ideas and opinions down their throats, and we should certainly not be subjecting school children to this political debate. I think certainly at the point
Clare,
at
you
which
say it's not indoctrination. It's not indoctrination, you say, that's hyperbole. But, hello, one school, for instance, has got the children memorising the entire, and it's not short, right, the entire Uluru Statement from the Heart. You don't consider that indoctrination, Year 5 students?
Well, what I think it is shortchanging students, because I know that when I left school, I wasn't taught any of the abiding, important life principles that would have really helped me. For instance, how to get a mortgage, what compounding interest is. And I think the most important thing we need to be teaching children about is the impact that AI is going to have on employment. So certainly I agree with you that there are
But that is indoctrination. I agree. And I think we're just scared to call it out. You know, I think we should be. I mean, am I being guilty of hyperbole here? Really, I don't know. Sarah, what do you reckon? I mean, you've got the Victorian government actually saying we want the students to think X and X and X about the treaty. That is indoctrination.
Well, you know, Andrew, I think children certainly have the potential to be indoctrinated here, and we've got a situation where children are already having a mental health crisis. They're not feeling proud to be Australian, and we need to be teaching children to be proud of Australia, one of the best countries in the world. And we also need to be teaching all children, regardless of race, about personal responsibility and resilience. We've all got in our history tragedy and adversity at some point to overcome, and unfortunately the only way is to take responsibility and move forward, and I feel that that's what children need to be taught.
I know. Claire, I know you think that's too much, but really parents can't be happy having one side of this debate taught to their kids.
Well, I completely agree. In the tradition of free speech, you've got to have both points of the argument put. You can't have one argument and excluding other points depending on what political side of the fence you sit in, which is why I do completely agree that just politics does not belong in our schools. And certainly you have to, and I think the overarching issue or concern with the voice is not the spirit of the voice. Everyone agrees with the intention and spirit. It's the fact that there isn't actually enough information for people to be making a fully informed decision at this point. And so certainly at the point at which even the average Australian doesn't have the full details of how it's actually going to work in practice and the rights and the powers, and I think importantly what's been omitted from the discussion is the limit on powers.
No, you're quite correct. We need the details, Claire, but to say we're all on board with the spirit, I am not on board with the spirit of racial division of Australia, and I suspect millions of other Australians aren't as well. We'll see how many there are come the referendum. Clare Batch, Sarah Game, thank you both so much for your time.